For many years, Turin in Italy was considered the Detroit of Italy. But unlike the American city, which went bankrupt in July 2013, Turin embarked on a process of transformation from a motor city to an economy based on services, information and communication technologies, finance, tourism, and innovative industries like aviation, robotics, and artificial intelligence. All of these efforts culminated in the Italian Tech Week. This is an event that brings on stage leaders from international companies, alongside the most innovative Italian and European startups. The most attended event, however, is the chat between Stellantis CEO John Elkann with leading innovators, a series that in the last 3 years has brought on stage figures like Elon Musk, Sam Altman, and this year Jeff Bezos. What makes the chat more engaging than the chats in other leading tech events is that you don't have the traditional scripted questions that people from the press generates after looking at other sources, like "last year you posted", "3 years ago you said", and so on. With this format, you have two industry leaders talking about issues, commenting organically on the actual answers instead of switching topics after every question. More importantly, they share a common experience. The leaders visiting Turin for the Italian Tech Week also share time together off-stage before and after the event. And, as we can see from these images, the city has the credentials to merge innovative ideas in technology with the traditions of a city rich in history and natural beauty, that the same innovations hopefully will help to preserve. At the beginning of the conversation, the two leaders talk about common experiences in growing up and the importance of the attention they received from their respective grandfathers. Towards the end, the conversation switched to AI and space travel. The common point in these topics is the importance of long-range planning. Here are the highlights.
Different conversations over the years we've had of this idea that business is a harsh environment. There's a very important humane side of it.
Yes.
And then what we do is really we put technology and cleverness to the service of others. Mm-hmm. And you can do that in a way which is kind and valuable.
Yes. And I think long-term thinking squares these things. So whenever you're in a situation where it seems that short-term, you're doing a business deal with someone, and if you think you're never going to deal with them again, then maybe you would come to a certain answer. But if you realize, I'm probably going to deal with this person for the rest of my life in one way or another, you come to a different answer. And so long-term thinking, whether it's with your customers or your business partners, or even with family members and loved ones, thinking about, okay, what do I want this to be like, not just right now, but 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now. So, in retail, I would always rather lose a sale than lose a customer. And you're thinking long term. And shareholders and customers and the business, everyone is aligned if you think out 10 or 20 years.
And that is also important in moments like the ones we're living, where there's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of angst. If you just get devoured by now, you'll lose the optimism for tomorrow. And I do feel that if you do look at long term, and if you think on decades rather than months, yes, what matters today is important for 10 years.
Yes.
And if you have that idea that 10 years things will be better and that we will have made progress, it helps today and it does relieve a lot of angst.
It also helps you decide what to focus on. So if, in a world that's rapidly changing, and because of AI and all the technologies we have and the dynamism in the world, so many things are changing, and they're changing so rapidly. So if you think long term, it forces you to think, what are the points of stability? What is not going to change? And one of the things that changes very slowly is customer needs. And so you can build a strategy around customer needs that will have durability. It will be durable in time. So an example, Amazon is that customers like fast deliveries. And so you would never expect 10 years from now, it would be impossible to imagine a customer saying, I love Amazon, I just wish you delivered a little more slowly. Or, I love Amazon, I just wish your prices were a little higher. Or, at Blue Origin, I love your rockets, but I just wish they were a little less reliable. And so these ideas, these big ideas that are customer-based, they start with the customer. It's an idea that is in the customer's brain. Those are the ones, because human nature doesn't change rapidly. And so what we as customers want tends to change slowly. And if you base your energies and direction and strategies and tactics, everything that makes a company effective around those customer needs, then you can change the details of how you get there all the time, because the world is changing so rapidly. The technologies will change, your competitive set will change. Everything will change except those needs. And so that's another way that long-term thinking is protective, because it forces you to think about the real customer needs, to center those as your big ideas, and then put energy into them in 100 ways, and to be very dynamic. I'd always say be stubborn on the vision and flexible on the details. And you have to be, because the world is changing, and you change your mind. I've noticed that people who are right a lot change their mind a lot. People who are wrong a lot are very stubborn on the details. You know who's undefeated? Reality. Reality wins every time. It's completely undefeated. You know, my best thing, my favorite thing, is to be with a small group of people with a big whiteboard in front of me and inventing. I am an inventor. This is my fundamental nature. One day in the early days, because I literally put me in front of a whiteboard and I can come up with 100 ideas in half an hour. And early in Amazon's history, Jeff Wilke came to me one day. He worked for Amazon for a quarter of a century, but this is when he probably knew me only for a year. And he said, Jeff, you have enough ideas to destroy Amazon. And this was such a shocking idea for me. As a founder, I had the great luxury of always being able to hire my tutors. They would hire these experienced senior executives, brilliant people like Diego and Jeff Wilke, and there were several others too. And I would listen to them, and they would teach me. And Jeff said, you have enough ideas per minute, per day, per week to destroy Amazon. I was like, what do you mean? He's like, you have to release the work at the right rate that the organization can accept it. And he was a manufacturing expert. And so, his view of the world was every time I released an idea, I was creating a backlog, a queue, work in process. And because it was just stacking up, it was adding no value. And in fact, it was creating distraction. And so he said, look, you have to figure out when to release these new ideas at a rate that the organization can accept them. And this sounds so obvious, but it was not obvious at the time to me. And this was a profound insight for me. And so I started prioritizing the ideas better, keeping lists of them, keeping them to myself until the organization was ready for the ideas. And then I also started figuring out, how can I build an organization that can be ready for more ideas? That's about having the right senior team and the right leadership and getting those people the executive bandwidth so that they could do more ideas per unit time. And that is what we built. We built a company that's very good at inventing and doing more than one thing at a time. And you do want to build, as the company gets bigger, you do want to be able to do more than one thing at a time. But that idea of releasing the work was very profound for me. And it made us operationally more effective while still being inventive.
And you think you're a better inventor on the back of that? So The actual inventions that...
Probably because it also forces you, if you are releasing the ideas their time, it forces you to prioritize them better. You end up sharpening the ideas better. And so, yeah, it probably does. But you have to wander. Thank you. Wandering, just one more thing on wandering. Wandering is so important because wandering is a kind of humility. So sometimes when people think about, how much should I wander? Wandering sounds so inefficient. But the only way to go straight to your destination is if you know where you're going. And sometimes you know where you're going, but sometimes you don't. And so wandering is that acknowledgement that in life and in business and in exploration and in invention, in building a company, a lot of the time you can see the mountaintop, but you can't see the trail. And you have to explore, and you have to wander. It may feel very inefficient, but it's actually very valuable. And it's really a recognition, it's a humility that you don't know where you're going.
Inventing has a dose that is not efficient. And
right.
it does require time to get ideas, to learn.
Yes.
To dream.
Yes.
On the other hand, you need to be efficient once you start building that.
That's right.
And iterate.
These are different things for different times. Sometimes when you know where you're going, yes, you should be very efficient.
So how to put it in harmony and not balancing? And I know you don't like to balance.
Right.
And so how can you put in harmony the dream side and the build side?
And by the way, just to fill that out a little, I don't love the word balance because it implies a trade-off. Like I've often had people ask me, how do you deal with work-life balance? And I'll say, I like work-life harmony because if you're happy at home, you'll be better at work. If you're better at work, you'll be better at home. These things go together.
No trade-off.
They're not a strict trade-off. And it's true, I think, for exploration, but also determined execution. You just need to do both, and they actually do feed each other. It's the things that come out of the execution give you new data and new ideas about what the next step should be in your exploration. So the two things don't work against each other, they work together. The touchstone, the thing you always go back to, is those customer needs. So that's the only way that I could advise any founder or entrepreneur is to deeply understand what are the big ideas that their customers want. And you should ask them, ask your customers, but it's not sufficient. You also have to invent on their behalf. Because the biggest breakthroughs, the most important ideas, customers don't know to ask. They don't know to ask for those things. That's why you have to dream, and you have to use your intuition and your gut and your heart. All of the data that gets used in business is essential. If you're in business and you're not looking at your data, trust me, your competitors are going to beat you. But if you're only looking at your data, you also will not win, or at least not win big. Because the most important decisions that every person makes when they're building something new is made with intuition. You cannot prove it, but you have an instinct and a hunch. And then you'll pay attention. If that turns out to be wrong, it won't be a big deal. You'll correct.
And in theme of long-range planning, here are some of the scenarios for the future with reference to AI and space travel.
But it doesn't mean that anything that's happening isn't real. Like, AI is real, and it is going to change every industry. In fact, it's a very unusual technology in that regard, in that it's a horizontal enabling layer. Today we talk about AI-first companies like OpenAI and Anthropic and Mistral and so on and so on and so on. there are so many startup companies that are kind of AI companies of various kinds. And that's normal for this phase. But that is not the biggest impact that AI is going to have. The biggest impact that AI is going to have is it is going to affect every company in the world. It is going to make their quality go up and their productivity go up. By every company, I literally mean every company, every manufacturing company, every hotel, every, consumer products company, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so that is hard to fathom, but it's real. I believe we'll have, in the next kind of couple of decades, I believe there will be millions of people living in space. That's how fast this is going to accelerate. It's interesting, too, because they'll mostly be living there because they want to. Our robotic technology is getting so good. We don't need people to live in space. Anything that we need done, if you need to do some work on the surface of the moon or anywhere else, we will be able to send robots to do that work. And that will be much more cost effective than sending humans.